Linda started to say, to ask about open marriage question. No motion. No, exactly.
I am sorry, my goodness.
Drops. A lot of drops. Keep it. They said keep it from drying out. Scrape my eyeball. Yeah, I know. It was not clear. It was. All right, here comes Danielle, and then we'll get going. Oh, thank you. All right. We are good. We have a doctor in the house, just in case, and a lawyer. We have a doctor and a lawyer. All right. It was recorded. I'll give everybody a second here. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our July 11th Portsmouth Town Council meeting. Before we begin, I just want to quickly touch base on the evacuation procedures. In the event of an emergency, we have two doors to your left, another one in the front here. We would exit the building and meet across the street at the school administration building and await further instruction. Now, if we could all stand for a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence for our men and women serving in harm's way. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If we could begin with the roll call. I did those. Zoom directions. Thank you. I'm a little rusty. No. I forgot we are also live streaming. So anyone who is participating from home, if you're calling in on your phone, star 9 will indicate there's a question. Star 6 will mute and unmute your phone. If you're on the Zoom feature, you can use the icon to raise your hand and indicate you have a question. For those of you participating remotely or in person tonight at the podium, please state your name and address for the town clerk. And now we can switch over to roll call.
Ms. Jufusa? Here. Ms. Abbott? Here. Mr. Hamilton?
Here.
Mr. Katzman?
Here.
Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Dr. Ryan?
Here.
Mr. Aguirre?
Here. Okay. I do not have anything to add for the president's executive summary. So we'll jump right into our consent agenda.
Move to approve as presented. Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jufusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we'll be sitting as the Board of License Commissioners. We have a peddler license, mobile food establishment, new Methods of a Madwoman, Inc., 182 Highland Street, Woonsocket.
Move to approve.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Move to adjourn as the Board of License Commissioners. Oh, skip.
Next, we have a peddler's license annual. It's Nickel Bar Isle Inc., DBA Lavanya Kudley, 107 Cedar Trails, Connecticut Court, rather, Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Move to approve.
Second. All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Now move to adjourn as the Board of License Commissioners.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we have minutes from our June 13th meeting, June 15th, June 27th, along with our executive session.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. And next, we have tax voucher. Request approval for tax voucher 2022-07-11-01 to 2022-07-11-03.
Move to approve.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to our town administrators report. Mr. Rayner?
Good evening, Mr. President, Town Council, ladies and gentlemen. The fire department held their annual promotion ceremony on June 29th at the Secaunet Sportsman's Club. 4 firefighters were promoted to fire lieutenant. Firefighter Michael Lopes, Joshua Rocha, Harrison Jones, and firefighter West Johnson. In addition, Lieutenant Nicholas Woodbine, who was officially promoted in February, was ceremoniously promoted. And then firefighter Alex Rivet, who was officially sworn in last August, was also ceremoniously sworn in. At a promotion meeting, or at promotion meetings recently held for police promotions, the chief has recommended, and I have approved the promotion of Lieutenant John Calhoun, Lieutenant Michael Morris, both to captain effective July 1st, and then Detective Sergeant Katu Kubkandani, accreditation sergeants, Sergeant Patrick O'Neill, Sergeant Lee Trott, and Sergeant Richard Ruest Jr. to the rank of lieutenants effective July 16th. The formal ceremony will be held at the annual police award ceremony at the Glen Manor House later this year. So my heartiest congratulations to all our newly promoted officers. With respect to our collective bargaining agreements that are still outstanding, attorney representatives for the fire and dispatch unions and the PMEA union have all asked for more time to prepare red line contract agreements for your review. So those contracts will now be ready for your approval at the next town council meeting. We were informed on July 2nd that the Portsmouth Fire Department has been awarded an Enbridge Fueling Futures Grant of $7,500. Those funds will be used to offset the cost to replace 10 self-contained breathing apparatus cylinders that have reached the end of their service life. And just a reminder, Town Hall will be closed August 8th in observance of Victory Day. August 8th is a Monday, which would normally have been a council meeting day. So the next town council meeting will be held on Tuesday, August 9th. And then lastly, I will be out of the office starting Thursday, and I will return August 1st, and I'll forward to those who will be acting in my absence. That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. Okay. Moving on to removals, resignations, and appointments. Our first item is a removal from the Prudence Island Planning Commission for Mr. Fred Stevenson.
Move to approve with regret. Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we have the resignation from the Parks and Recreation Committee, Mr. Sam Orbert.
Move to accept with regret. Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. And next, we have an appointment to the Economic Development Committee for Mr. Daniel Corrigan.
Motion to approve, appoint Dan Corrigan to the PEDC.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to old business, it's the monthly finance report that was discussed at the last meeting. No vote was taken, so we needed a vote on it.
Motion to receive and place on file. Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Sarah.
Thank you, Mr. President. Larry Fitzmaurice, 50 Kristen Court. I always ask this question this time of year. What is projected surplus or deficit?
I believe at the last meeting, it was discussed that it was, the monthly finance report was, there might be a small,
Correct.
small
Yeah. And we'll
surplus.
still be, I mean, obviously, they're closing the books this time of year, as you know. We will accept bills which will be credited towards the last fiscal year, all the way up through third week of August. So it's a bit difficult to tell right now, but we do look like we'll have a surplus in the range of about $100,000 to $200,000, and that is accounting for the collapse of Fairview Lane, but that's obviously subject to change.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Okay, moving on to old business number 2. It's the reconsideration of town council approval of the 1-year pilot program for automatic license plate readers on the Mount Hope Bridge. Mr. Katzman?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a few remarks that I'd like to make now, and perhaps some further comments after members of the public and other members of the council have had a chance to speak. But I want to start things off by making a motion to rescind the vote of the town council's approval of the 1-year pilot program for automatic license plate readers on the Mount Hope Bridge that the council took on June 13th.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
Thank you for that. I just have a few brief remarks.
Okay.
I have always believed and tried to conduct myself that good government means changing one's opinion when one learns further information than one had at the time. And I know that we all made the decisions we felt were appropriate, given the information we had. But a significant number of other perspectives and voices were brought to our attention. And at present, I feel that the privacy concerns outweigh the purported safety advantages to the extent that there are any. And I actually question whether there are at this point. I'd like to thank a few people. First, I want to thank Chief Peters, because I know he brought this to the council in the spirit of doing something good for the town. And I place no fault on Chief Peters or on the police department or on the Bristol Police or on any of these organizations that stepped up to fund it. I think they all came from a place of suicide prevention and doing good deeds, as did we when we voted on June 13th. I'd like to thank all of the citizens of Portsmouth who sent comments to us, and there were numerous, they were all, I found them all very civil and informative. And I'd also like to thank the ACLU that wrote what I think is a relatively exhaustive and insightful dissection of the privacy concerns raised by the license plate readers in the structure and form that we had voted upon. And with that, I yield the floor to whoever else wants to speak.
Okay. Are there any other councilors that would like to speak at this time? Okay. Are there any comments? Okay.
John McDade, 65 Gormley Avenue. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. I'll be quick. I just want to make 3 points. First, I want to agree with Councilor Katzman. I believe everyone involved in this was operating in good faith. I know Chief Peters. I got to know him and members of the Portsmouth Police Department during the Civilian Police Academy, which I participated in several years ago. And I believe that he and the members of the Portsmouth Police Department were doing what they believe is in the best interest of the public. And I thank you for your concerns. And I know this council only has the best interest and safety of all Rhode Island citizens in mind. So there's no blame. There's no reason for anyone in town to think ill of the council or the police department because of the prior vote. However, now that we've had time and have explored additional issues around this, I'm hoping that the council will feel comfortable making a different decision tonight. And I really implore you to do that for 3 reasons. First, this proposal was sold to the council under false pretenses. In an article in the July 1st Newport Daily News, a representative of Flock, the vendor, said that their product has, quote, no specific use case for suicide prevention, unquote, and stated that in the over 1,500 cities where they have installed their cameras, they have never been placed next to a bridge for suicide prevention. For that reason alone, this decision should be reversed. I do not blame the Portsmouth Police Department. They accepted the materials provided by Bristol and edited them. They trusted their fellow officers who, no doubt, trusted the salespeople from Flock who were eager to get their cameras into another community. Second, there are significant reasons to doubt, even if Portsmouth were to be the first of 1,500 cities to try this, any claim that this would prevent suicide. It takes 1 minute at average speed to drive to the middle of the Mount Hope Bridge. I timed it. We know from the material submitted to the Bristol Town Council that there is a 10-second delay in receiving notifications. Add a minimal 5-second delay to call the Portsmouth North car, and you have 45 seconds to respond. Assuming even travel at 70 miles an hour, if the car were any further than Valhalla Drive on Boyd's Lane, Sunny Acres on Bristol Ferry Road, or just past the Bay Point Inn on Anthony, they would not arrive in time. Yes, I spent some time on Google Maps. Among over 100 responses to my posts about this on social media, there was general incredulity about the claim. This name may not mean much to the council, but internationally respected electronic privacy advocate Cory Doctorow weighed in on Twitter, calling the idea of Portsmouth using license plate cameras as an effective suicide prevention tool farcical. Third, this was sold to the council as zero cost. The first year funded by the Matthew Patton Foundation and the East Bay Community Action Program. And I respect both those organizations. I had a constructive exchange with the Matthew Patton Foundation, and we simply disagree. Neither of these organizations, in my opinion, should be funding something which the vendor themselves disclaims as being outside the scope of their mission statements. In addition, I ask, is this really free? In the documents submitted to the council, the Portsmouth PD notes that the effective use of the cameras requires maintaining local hit lists, a weekly requirement for audits of lists, and a mandatory quarterly data audit, as well as the creation of a transparency portal updated quarterly. This means that there is a non-zero staff time cost, which I assume was not factored into the decision. I articulated additional concerns in my letter to the council, which I will not be duplicative of here. And I know that you received the letter from the ACLU, so I leave it to them as experts to speak to the civil liberties issues. Again, I believe that the citizens of Portsmouth should hold the council and police department harmless for their support of this idea last month. It was all done with the best of intentions, but we all know where the roads paved with good intentions lead. If the council truly wants to help with suicide prevention, I suggest they support the efforts by Melissa Cotta and Bridging the Gap to continue pushing the state to install barriers and nets on all our bridges. Nets stop jumpers, cameras do not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDade. Yeah, online? Okay. Are there two? Is there another person on? Okay. All right, let's go to the first person. Hello, can you hear us?
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
We can. Name and address, please.
My name is David Morris. I live at 43 Park Ave in Portsmouth, Rhode Island. Taking from what the gentleman just said, I also believe that the best intentions were initially used when this was first brought up, the pilot program, I mean. However, I do not feel that this should go forward. And for these reasons alone, according to Neighborhood Scout, a consumer website about home security systems, Portsmouth was ranked one of the safest communities in Rhode Island. 89% and safer than 89% of US cities. Only 10% of communities in Rhode Island have a lower crime rate than Portsmouth. Chances of becoming a victim of crime in this community is 1 in 271. The US average is 1 in 43. Chances of becoming a victim of violent crime is 1 in 1,986. Now, with these statistics, because I know the company that is proposing this pilot program, they preach safety. They say that safety is their number one concern for communities and people that use their product. And from what I can see, I don't think this community needs their services. Please excuse me, I'm just a little nervous, but yeah, no, I don't think they need their services. I think the police department here has done a great job of deterring any would-be crime to homes and to persons. And if we can figure out a way to help suicide prevention in this town, let's go for it. But I don't think that this is the way. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. And okay. Hello, can you hear us?
Hi. My name's John Patton. I live at 36 Acacia. I live at 36 Acacia Road in Bristol, Rhode Island. I am the treasurer and secretary of the Matthew Patton Foundation. We were founded to support suicide prevention among service members, veterans and their families. And in that role, we've teamed with the Bristol Health Equity Zone and Rhode Island State Governor's Challenge to reduce suicide. When we were approached by Bristol Police Department about installing the flock cameras for the use of the Bristol Police Department, and I want to make clear to everybody, this is not flock running the show. This is BPD and Portsmouth Police Department running the show. They will be leasing the cameras. They are not Fox cameras. So I need to correct several misconceptions. Mr. Morse does not think we need more safety cameras. No, we do not. The company's name happens to be Flock Safety. The cameras are being placed on Boyd Lane and Bristol Ferry Road in order to stop individuals from self-harm, among other things that are listed in Section 5A of the Portsmouth Police Policy. There are explicit uses provided for in that policy. You can probably speak to those better than I, but those uses are explicit to individuals who are either endanger themselves, pose a known danger to others. They are not there to make sure that the guy that breaks into your home or steals your package gets caught. These are not crime. This installation is not for crime prevention. It is for suicide prevention and crime response. So if there's a known criminal associated with a vehicle, the system is used to find the vehicle in hopes that that criminal is with that vehicle. That may not always be the case, I admit. Move on to Mr. McDade's criticism. As with the unfortunate name of the company being Flock Safety, and suicide prevention, folks, is a safety issue. I do want to make that clear. The fact that they have not yet seized the opportunity to place these cameras in positions where they can be used to intervene in a life or a self-harm situation, such as a jump from a high structure or a bridge, that does not mean they can't be used for that purpose. There's medication on the market today that is used to treat erectile dysfunction, which was originally developed to address heart conditions. So there are always ways to adapt a product to a better use. And I think this is an opportunity for the town of Portsmouth to see such an opportunity and use these cameras in a way that perhaps they have not been used to date, to reduce the number of those who complete suicide from the Mount Hope Bridge. As for the cost aspect of the project, my discussions with Flock Security, or Flock Safety, I'm sorry, have indicated to me that the audits are a computer-generated audit, and therefore are essentially no cost. It's run the audit, here's the report, and then somebody will review the report and post it to the portal for transparency purposes. So I dispute the claim that there's a cost with everything, but I dispute the claim that it is a cost that is more than negligible. That's oh, and I also have to take issue with the ACLU letter. Perhaps there is a new ACLU letter that pertains to the town of Portsmouth in this particular application. But the letter that I have seen floating about is one to the city of Cranston, who snuck in under the cover of night and put up speed cameras and traffic cameras. Again, not the purpose of these, and prohibited by policy by the Portsmouth Police Department. Many of those issues have been addressed, I believe, including the transparency. Let's have a discussion before we put them in so that everybody knows what's going on and can monitor what is going on for the 12 months of the pilot program. So I would submit to the council that they consider this.
Mr. Patton, we're having a very hard time hearing you. I don't know if it's the connection or how close you are to your microphone, but we're having a hard time hearing you.
Phenomenon, and am I better?
Yes.
It was a little louder.
Yeah.
How much did you miss?
Are you all set, Mr. Patton?
Can you hear me?
I think we may have lost him. Yeah. Okay. All right. Is he still? Okay. All right. Well, let's put him on hold. We'll try to come back to him. I don't know if you can send him a message in the chat that we'll come back to him.
Good evening. My name is Faye Dion, 379 McCoy Lane. I'm testifying this evening on my own behalf as a resident of Portsmouth and also as a board member of the Rhode Island ACLU.
I just want to make sure can everybody hear?
You hear me okay? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Just a quick response to the caller. There was another letter submitted by the ACLU. I don't know if it's available on the website yet or not, but it does go into significant detail on the specific application that is being proposed for Portsmouth. So as a Portsmouth resident, I would like to add my own strong opposition to this project, even while personally knowing someone who experienced the loss of a family member in this way. It is a tragedy. And when it happens, it compels us to ask the question, have we done, or can we do anything more? Should we do anything more to prevent this continuing tragedy occurring in our community? As you consider this proposal, I respectfully request that you keep in mind a couple of points I'd like to make. First, what does the existing data tell us? Mr. McDade stole some of my thunder in his summary of the article in the Newport Daily News. Suffice it to say that reliable data simply does not exist on successful interventions. This begs the question then, why not simply install the system and compile our own data? After all, it's free to the town. Let's collect it. If it works, we'll keep it. If not, we won't invest any more time or energy. Reliable data documenting the problem seems to be a quest that we would all have. It seems reasonable, but the problem is it's not our data. Here's what Flock Safety says about data that its system collects. After giving assurances that it does not sell or disclose data to third parties for unauthorized, their word, purposes, Flock goes on to say, however, Flock may access, use, preserve, and/or disclose the footage to law enforcement authorities, government officials, and/or third parties if legally required to do so, or if Flock has a good faith belief that such access, use, preservation, or disclosure is reasonably necessary to comply with a legal process or request. So here's the hypothetical for you. If the state of Mississippi, and I don't mean to single out just that state, obtains a judicial order for data on someone believing to be traveling to Rhode Island to obtain an abortion, if I understand Flock's own words, Flock will hand over that data. Subpoenas issued in connection with divorce or other family matters would also meet the test of compliance with a legal process or a request. In fact, it appears that anyone who can convince a legal authority that they have the need to know where someone is or has been, they can seek to obtain this data and Flock will supply it if compelled to do so. They also provide boilerplate wording about data security. It states that it uses administrative, operational, technical, and physical safeguards to protect ALPR information from unauthorized access, use, destruction, modification, or disclosure. As a lawyer who has worked in the data privacy and security arena for healthcare companies for most of my career, I know those magic words by heart. And I can tell you those magic words unfortunately do not inoculate anyone from data breaches or the activities of bad actors in the chain of custody. The second point I'd like to make is in defending the APLR system, I've seen some people shrug and say, well, tracking of personal data is a horse that's already left the barn. Cell phones geolocate us, EasyPass records our license plates for tolling purposes. Private and law enforcement cameras document our comings and goings in stores, restaurants, across highways, and on the doorsteps of ring-equipped homes. Individuals can and do take some control over these data collection channels. Cell phone tracking can be disabled if you know how to do it. You can figure it out. But to be sure, we are all tracked and recorded in ways that we are both aware of and in many ways that we are not even aware of. Technology now evolves so quickly that we don't have time to stop and ask ourselves what checks and balances need to be in place to preserve our constitutional rights and protect our privacy. Surveillance technologies put in place for one purpose, historically, we know will inevitably expand into other uses as the technology evolves and advances and adds new bells and shiny whistles. Rhode Island ACLU's written testimony, which I strongly urge everyone in attendance to read, takes a detailed look at the Portsmouth Police Department's guidance for the capture, storage, and use of digital data obtained in APLR technology. There are provisions in the policy that allow use of ALPR to identify vehicles associated with criminal investigations and permit the capture of more than just license plates data to aid in such investigations. Moreover, reasonable suspicion or probable cause is not required before using APLR. I would add an exclamation point to that. Let me just conclude by saying that given the paucity of actionable data on suicide prevention, the numerous opportunities for backdoor access to data either in connection with judicial orders or criminal investigations, the potential for abuse that such backdoors open up, and the inherent uncertainty of keeping data safe from loss or theft and bad actors, are we really ready in Portsmouth to add one more instance of Orwellian surveillance to the weight we all feel already from being constantly recorded and monitored, often without our knowledge? I urge the council to overturn its previous approval of the APLR and instead focus on how to facilitate and redouble our efforts to implement physical barriers instead. I urge you to rescind your previous approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. We're going back to, is it Patton? Mr. Patton?
How am I coming through now?
Try it again.
How am I coming through now?
It's faint. Yeah. I mean, it was clear. You can continue on.
Okay, so I'm not sure where I disappeared from sound earlier. But I don't really want to rehash everything if you heard everything.
A quick summary.
A quick summary is that our view of this camera system as a safety system to protect those at risk, potential suicides, amber silver alerts, and to find known criminals through their license numbers is an advantage to the community and citizens of Portsmouth that can save lives and that we have today. We agree that barriers on the bridge are the right solution. There are no barriers on the bridge. The railing is less than the railing that you have to install due to building codes. So while I applaud Melissa and Brian, and I wish them every success, until that time comes, we would like to see a preventive tool that can be used by the Portsmouth Police Department to save even one of the 17 lives that have been lost from that bridge in the past 5 years, if I remember the testimony earlier correctly, or from the previous meeting correctly. I think that fear of how the data might be misused should not overwhelm us in our thinking about the good that we can do if we have access to this technology to allow the police to intervene in preventing a suicide attempt or multiple suicide attempts from the bridge. I implore the council to uphold their previous decision and go forward with the camera system for the one-year pilot. And at the end of the year, we will make sure that we've satisfied the ACLU's concerns as much as anybody can satisfy the ACLU's concerns. And that we've produced data that shows that this method of intervening has a measurable effect on outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patton. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna go to Chief Peters.
Mr. President, members of the council, I appreciate everybody's involvement, concerns. I appreciate Mr. Katzman, Mr. McDade. I have a lot of respect for Mr. McDade as well as the individuals that brought some their concerns here this evening. I've not seen the letter from the ACLU, so I'm not familiar with that updated letter. But what I do have is that the ACLU outlined in their, or were quoted in the Newport Daily News article, that they're appreciative of the fact that Portsmouth has approached the implementation of flock safety with a type of increased transparency. And they're appreciative of that they appear to have considered many of the points made in our letter. From the beginning of this has been a pilot program. I came before the council a month ago as a pilot program that I still believe that this program has its merits. This is a program that I believe that can use technology to help us help other people. And I know that there were concerns from the letters that were brought in. I've not received any concerns myself, but I'm willing to sit down with anyone who has concerns should the council choose to continue on with this program with perhaps even changes to make them feel comfortable, to understand the product, to see how we use it, to understand our policy. I want to address some of the concerns, though, that were brought up in the letter to the council to kind of clarify some of the issues to show that our policy does address this, that we are trying to be as transparent as possible. I will point out that the situation is definitely real. We were there as early as latest as 4th of July evening for a person in mental health crisis, where officers had to physically restrain that person who was leaning on the side of the bridge. So what happens in Portsmouth, it's not advertised, it doesn't come out in press releases, but it does happen. I just want to make sure and certain that the public is aware that Bristol Police Department and ourselves still do and still respond to these type of situations. To address kind of the concerns that were outlined in Mr. McDade's letter, I'll go paragraph by paragraph. I don't want to take up a lot of time and I won't rehash my presentation, but I thought it's important to address the concerns and the issues that were brought up in this letter. The first concern was about the nets and that there is money for a feasibility study. That $1 million is just that, a feasibility study. There is no guarantee. There is no timeline of when that study will happen, of when the actual results and what those results would be. So it is still just that, a feasibility study that we have concerns about when the process would actually be finalized. The second paragraph talks about flock safety, you know, I mean, as its core mission. This is a pilot program, like it was always presented. This may not be on the Flock's website as a use that they use it for, but I believe Laura Ann is online, and there are other examples of how this has been successful around the country. I know I outlined one community that used it, but it's not something, just like how we don't do press releases when people are up on the bridge. They're not posting online when this is successful in their program, just for the privacy concerns that are associated with that. But there are stories of nationwide how this is successful. And as I said, this would be used as a pilot program to try to address this issue. One of the fifth paragraph, when it says the stated objective of deployment, suicide prevention, where is this on the list? So Section 3F, which is referred to, is giving a description and definition of a hit. So that's what that is referring to. That's referring to the description and definition of a hit. It's addressed in Section 5A1, endangered persons is the first thing on the list. And it's actually the first part of our policy that addresses why it is. Policies were written for officers to understand. An officer would know that an endangered person is, and that's what that language is there for. In paragraph number 8 about not be tracked, is this only in the case of an existing BOLO? Absolutely. Vehicles are not going to be simultaneously tracked. That is only in the case of a BOLO that we receive for a person in mental health crisis. And then we would be able to let the officers know that person has crossed over. Now that person is in Bristol. Now they've come back. So when it's talked about our response time, you're absolutely right. Are we going to be able to prevent 100% of individuals with suicide? Absolutely. I cannot confirm that we would be able to do that. But you are going to have a chance for people who go over the bridge. We would have this simultaneous tracking so we would know that individual is, that we would know now that that vehicle is on the Bristol side of the bridge. So Bristol can devote their resources to try to find that vehicle where it's located in Bristol or where it is over in Portsmouth. Paragraph number 10, officers will not take any action that restricts the freedom of any individual solely based on the ALPR unless it's been validated. That is addressed as well. That's addressed. The first paragraph prior to that in section 6F speaks on what the officer needs to do before any action is taken. Also in section G1 and 2, it addresses what officers need to do. Officers want to make certain that when they encounter a vehicle, that they're doing those checks, that they're not unreasonably stopping citizens who have no association with what we're looking for. They want to make certain that they have procedures in place that are written in this policy that is double checked, that they are making sure that they are calling it in, that they're confirming with dispatch or the mobile data terminals about what is that and confirming who's involved in that vehicle, who's that vehicle, and if that is the exact vehicle that they were looking for. Finally is paragraph 11. Officers should attempt, where the concern was about the language, for officers should attempt to visually match the driver. So this was listed, the should was listed in an example section. Should is used because an officer may not be able to identify who is behind the wheel. And I know people may assume that officers always know who's behind the vehicle, whether it's male or female, what the description of it is. I challenge anyone to sit on the side of the road when vehicles are traveling by you, or if a vehicle is in front of you and you pull up behind it, to be able to identify characteristics of that individual. So should they? Absolutely. But is there going to be a time that they can't do it? Yes. And that's why the policy has it in there as an example that they should take all reasonable measures, but there will be times where they can't. If it's a male versus a female, and we know that a male is the one who is despondent, and we're in a mental health crisis, and we can't tell if it's a male or female, then the officer would have to stop that car. They wouldn't be able to identify it. And it's not something that we can guarantee 100% of the time that we would know the characteristics. So I do support keeping this program. I believe it has its value. After I saw Ms. McDade's concerns, I did reach out to Flock and say, what is there that we can do to improve this, to try to address even more of the concerns to do this. And one of the changes, if there's concern about the retention, is the system is able to go down from 30 days to 10 days. So it moves it back where we're not keeping the retention of any vehicles associated for 30 days. It would move it down to a 10-day timeframe. Also, they can put measures in place that would restrict the searching of a vehicle. So no image will be stored unless they are from a hot list. So those vehicles would not be retained by the system. So the concern of the, I believe Mr. McDade believed there'd be over 800,000 vehicles. I don't know if that's the accurate amount of vehicles that would be there. But if that's the accurate amount or somewhat in that ballpark, the only vehicles that would be retained for the images would be vehicles that were on the hot list. And that is the hot list is when we put the BOLO into the system. when there is a vehicle of an individual who is in a mental health crisis, or should there be an amber alert or a silver alert. So I support these changes. I ask that the council not completely eliminate this program. I believe it has value. I believe that the Bristol Police Department and ourselves have done everything possible to be as transparent, to put everything out in the open. I believe that this product will allow the system and the technology will help our officers help other people. And I believe was stated in there, the proportion of it, of privacy versus assistance and what this would solve. I stick by what I said a month ago, that one life to me, that this system would be worth it. That if we can save one life, or we can get our officers up there based on the BOLO, and BOLOs aren't always come in time. I mean, I've seen many times throughout my career where we get an alert from someone. We send officers up to the bridge. That person is not there. The officers then clear and they have other calls to respond to. They're dealing with other issues. And then later on that evening, it could be 30 minutes later, 45 minutes later, all of a sudden we get the call, someone is already on the bridge. These cameras and these systems will be able to help us, alert us, so dispatch receives that notification that lets us know that, hey, that BOLO individual, that person, they're back in the area, you better divert your resources back there. So I thank you for your time. I do appreciate the process here. I do still support the program. I do believe is beneficial. I don't know if Laura Ann is online, if she has any additional comments to address. I know some of the concerns about storage and retention and security and privacy. If Laura Ann is online to address any of those concerns that the council may have or that was brought up this evening.
Yes. Hey, Chief Peters, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good evening, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to come and address some of the misconceptions about flock safety and the devices that we are hoping to partner with your community to install. I have a couple of things that I want to address over the call, but I also would really appreciate if it's up, to the council, if any of you have specific concerns that you'd like for us to address. I think oftentimes when we deal with technology companies like your community member addressed earlier, it seems like there's so much information that is unknown that we can't figure out, that we're constantly being tracked and there's nothing we can control. But here at Flock, we actually want to go through this governing process because we want there to be transparency in public safety. We want there to be transparency in the way that we're using technology. And we actually have designed our system and processes to do that. And so I'm happy to answer any specific questions that you guys have in your consideration as well. A couple of objective things that I want to address that I think were specific to Mr. McDade's letter. The first piece is on our use of the machine learning technology. And I really appreciate the opportunity to get to explain how our algorithm works and how it can provide your police with the objective data that they would need to intervene in this case. So Flock's machine learning algorithm is primarily used to categorize vehicles by make, model, type, year, etc. So the more cars that the system sees, the smarter it gets by learning how to differentiate between, let's say, shades of red or blue in the car, or what the visual differences are between a Civic and a Camry. And so as Flock's system learns, this helps us be able to provide our police customers with better information that they need to intervene. And as Portsmouth's ALPR policy already states, all of the data that we will provide them will be verified by a police officer. And I think it's important to remember that this is, a data that will help them intervene in a suicide, which, as has already been mentioned, is a public safety crisis that is often not publicized, that is a very private matter that we still ask our police to respond to. And so the goal here is to provide better, faster evidence to help them prevent a tragic death and respond timely. On that note about suicide, I do want to just let you guys know, it's not something that is a specific use case we highlight, as has already been discussed. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. Just last week in North Texas, our data was able to help our customer intervene in a potential suicide case. So this is happening across the country, even if it's not something in one of our public case studies or isn't yet in a press conference. And on that note, we want to help provide our police customers with better data. And so we've actually proactively reached out to the national 988 folks to see if there are opportunities for us to collaborate. And so after we were approached by Portsmouth and Bristol to do this, we began that process internally to try to explore that opportunity, because we know it's something our police are having to do, and we want to equip them with the information they need by working with those partners if possible. So the last thing I'll mention, and then hopefully can answer questions that you guys have, is on the data security. So I think there was some confusion related to Mr. Dade's letter about the term data tower in the policy. Right, we don't write these policies for our police folks. So if we need to provide some more information to make it more accurate about the way our cloud service works, we are happy to do that for you guys before you approve. But we actually store all the data through a cloud system in a partnership with AWS. And as I mentioned last time, this is the highest level of security server, the same level of security that the intelligence community uses. And we provide that to our customers because we want there to be the highest level of security, right? So we hear you on making sure that your data is not shared, is not stolen, is not sold, and we are committed to doing everything that we can to prevent that from happening. At Flock, we believe that there can be a balance in using public safety technology and protecting civil liberties. And that's actually why I left my job in government, to come help this company and help communities across the country figure out what that balance looks like for each unique place. Again, happy to answer any more questions, but Chief, is there anything else you'd like me to cover?
No, thank you. Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Mr. Fitzmaurice?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be quick. On June 27th, PCC grudgingly supported Chief Peters' proposal. We have opposed almost all surveillance proposals in the town previous to that. But we felt, in view of the fact that we have a problem with a number of suicides on the bridge, it was a reasonable thing to try. However, I must tell the council, the distance between John McDade and I is very, very narrow. And our support was contingent upon the adoption of the police policy, the operating policy for the surveillance system, being adopted as an ordinance of the town of Portsmouth. I'd like to ask the council where we are on any effort like that, because you did approve this at the last meeting. Does anybody know? So I guess we're not making any progress.
We approved the policy and the fact that you couldn't make any additions or deletions to that policy without coming back to the town council. So technically it doesn't have the strength of an ordinance, but.
Well, I think it needs to be an ordinance, and our support is contingent upon it being an ordinance. I understand the argument that was made. However, there's a difference between a policy and an ordinance, and all of us should understand that quite well. One is easily changed and the other one is not. You have to go through a legally required process before the people to change an ordinance. The other one you don't. And that's all really there is to the idea. So again, we supported based on that contingency. And I believe that much of what the ACLU has made in its case tonight and its letter to Cranston rings true to me. Thank them for their letter. I don't know, I haven't read the new one, so I need to do that as well. But we're all facing a problem here, and we need to deal with it intelligently, not just haphazardly. So I strongly recommend the council proceed to adopt an ordinance before this thing is instituted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzmaurice. Okay. Is there anyone else in the audience? Sorry.
My name's Sal Carseller. I live at 63 Leaps Road. I'm not going to cover what was said already. I just want to say that I'm not in favor of any surveillance on citizens that are law abiding, none whatsoever. We've been encroached upon over and over on our constitutional rights. I'm seeing this getting worse and worse. I asked the council that it's not just about this decision. You are going to be presented with sheep and wolves clothing over and over again in the years to come. You need to ask yourself, at least I do, I ask myself all the time, what is the pro, the gain over the con? And the bottom line is, as a law-abiding citizen, an American citizen, which I'm proud to be, I do not like the idea of any system tracking my whereabouts. If I am a criminal, feel free to track me. I am not a criminal. That stands for all my constitutional rights. I'm going to tell you a little something. I was not born in this country. I was born in Spain under the dictatorship of Franco. My family escaped that dictatorship in the 1960s. I remember being a small child, being run through the streets because it was getting dark by my grandmother saying, we got to get home because the civil guards will be ruthless. So to me, these are not up for my constitutional rights and freedoms in America. I take very, very deep pride in, and I see them being eroded. I also work in technology. I'm entrusted for 30 years. I've done data collection. I worked for IBM for 36 years, spent 10 years in data science. I now work for a top investment corporation. I'm entrusted with making sure that our data is safe in the cloud. I'm going to tell you that unless the only way to keep data safe in the cloud is for you to completely own it and bring your own security keys. I do not believe that Flock is going to allow you or us as Portsmouth to bring our own security keys. What that means is that if you keep the data, we actually double encrypt data with 2 sets of keys. It cannot be unencrypted without it. We do so when we transport it on the wire, and we do so when we save it to disk. My understanding from what I read in the newspaper, Flock has access to that data. These are not your keys. There was an example given in there where they came right out and said point blank that they, after looking through the data, they found a hit on a subject's vehicle in a private security camera. That should be most concerning. That means that that customer was paying to have cameras on their premise, and yet Flock was able to access that data. If Portsmouth, which I am not in favor of, but if you feel that you want to go forward with a proof of concept, I highly encourage you to ask Amazon Services to please encrypt your data with your keys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carcel. Who is it? Okay. Oh, okay.
Hi there. Yeah, I just wanted to respond to that particular community member. Totally agree with you about the importance of data security. And that's why our system, we actually double encrypt the system at every point of the process. So when the data is collected, when it is sent to the server, and when it's on the server, those are all different encryption codes. And we have a double encryption process for that. So just wanted to let you guys know we have those concerns in mind when we're designing this system. I think one final thing that I'll close on. I appreciate the beginning of the conversation where you guys were all talking about how you understood that there were best intentions in mind when creating this. And that's actually one of Flock's values, is that we all assume best intentions about each other, about the communities we work with. And so I would ask that you guys consider extending that assumption to us at Flock. I know it can be scary to think about a company as a partner, but Flock is different in the way that we approach things, and we're different in the way we consider privacy. And so based on all the information, I would ask the generosity of assuming that best intention to us as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Jessica, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can. Name and address, please.
This is Jessica Roach, and I live at 23 Canton Ave in Portsmouth. And, just wanted to say very supportive of things that are evidence-based for suicide prevention. So would be on board for something like barriers. But I guess my biggest concern, similar to things that other people have mentioned, would be this data that Flock is collecting is extremely sensitive data. So they're going to be collecting, in essence, mental health data on people. They're flagging people who, they're deeming to be at risk for suicide or mental health or behavioral health issues. And Flock is saying, please give us the benefit of the doubt. But the reality is they're not obligated to abide by certain standards that medical providers are, required to do so. So that's just a concern for me, is like where that data goes to, how it's stored, and will they really maintain that? So I guess I just wanted to speak to that.
Thank you, Jessica. Mr. Patton, do you have anything new to add? Mr. Patton, we cannot hear you. I think it's just a connection issue. Mr. Patton? No, we're just getting a low muffle. Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's a problem on your end, Mr. Patton.
I'm sorry, I unplugged the wrong cord. How's it out now?
Okay, unfortunately, I think we're gonna have to move on.
Can I try one?
Dr. Ryan, I think.
Yeah, I do have a question for the representative from Flock. The questions raised in the ACLU letter and also by Mr. McDade and others. If while you are storing the data you've collected from your cameras, if, for instance, a law enforcement agency from another state subpoenaed or otherwise requested the records, would you be required to give them?
Yeah, I am so glad that you asked this question, because I think that it connects also to the individual who just spoke over the phone. So we design our system for our customers based on your policies, right? So we will only share the data and share your data with whomever you say we can share that data with. So for example, if you say that we can share with Portsmouth Police for the purposes of preventing suicide on the bridge, as the policy says right now, that's who we will share your data with. If you do not want us to share the data with other police departments in Rhode Island, we will not share that data with other police departments in Rhode Island or with any other state for that matter. We will design our system and its sharing capabilities based on your community's needs as outlined in that policy. So in terms of the concerns about the mental health providers, right? I totally hear you there. This is, like I said, this is a new space that we are have been successful in other parts of the country, but we're figuring out all the details there. So I would just like to say that I think the police are often dealing with folks that are experiencing mental health crises, right? And they are already the stewards of that data. So by nature of them owning this data, it's no different from the other data that they would have based on a BOLO or other kind of interaction.
What if the FBI requests the data?
So I would point you to our lawyer for that question. I think, that's such a small, rare use case that I don't know of an instance when it has popped up for us. I think that I know that there are aspects of FOIA where because it's law enforcement specific, that it doesn't apply to FOIA laws often. But again, I'm not a lawyer. I would point you to ask that specific question to our lawyer, but I know that he's actively engaged in conversations like that with communities, so that if you guys need that question answered before you feel comfortable moving forward, happy to pull him into that conversation as well.
Thank you. Was there anything else? Did Mr. Patton try to chime in with messaging? Okay. Any further? I was gonna ask if there's any further questions. Oh. I couldn't read that fast. Okay. So, Mr. Katzman, or did you want to comment?
I have a couple of closing thoughts. To Mr. Carcello's point of data only being secure if you own it, that's a good start. But a slight expansion on that, and I'm not really being entirely flip here, but the history of data breaches, even with encrypted data, teaches us that the only truly secure data resides on a computer that is turned off. There is nothing that can prevent stolen data. If a sophisticated enough actor wants it, they'll get it. To the point of presuming people are acting in good faith and with good intentions, I make that presumption of everyone on this council, of Chief Peters, of everyone here, of the foundation, Mr. Patton, everyone is acting with good intentions. Even, I think, Flock Safety is acting in good intentions. With all of those presumptions made, I still do not believe that the privacy and surveillance risks outweigh the benefit. I ask for my fellow council members' support of the motion to rescind. If you still support the program in principle, though, I suggest we rescind what we've done, which will effectively hit pause and go back to revisit the many issues that have been raised tonight, including adoption of an ordinance rather than the policy, and of having further conversations with Flock Safety perhaps, and really being comfortable so that folks who come to address us say they too are comfortable with the idea. One last point I want to make, and it's been raised, but I want to hit on it again. Flock Systems website describes its devices that, quote, capture objective evidence and machine learning to create and deliver unbiased investigative leads to law enforcement. Machine learning is a branch of artificial intelligence, and I don't embrace the hyperbolic framing of Orwellian and scary. These things should be approached and analyzed at face value. And it is simply the fact that modern machine learning systems are not yet perfect. I've spent over 20 years in studying computer science and working in the industry as a software engineer, including on government supercomputer systems running machine learning systems. But more than my personal, so I'm not ignorant of what these things are. More than my professional background, though. Well, I guess it's still part of my professional background, although I'm not building these things anymore. In my current line of work in business development, licensing novel technologies from university research, I'm very well read on the current state of machine learning. And AI and machine learning, they are powerful tools, but they have flaws. And specifically, machine learning systems do exactly that. They learn on the fly while operating. We don't know what they're learning until after we look at it after the fact and say, oh, that's interesting what they learned and what they did with that. But while it's running, it is simply a fact that the folks who design the algorithms don't know what the algorithm has become while it's operating. They're great. I am a big believer in technology, and I know that AI and machine learning systems are going to make all of our lives great and better, and they already do in facets we may not even know because they're behind a cloud somewhere. But I am unwilling to point a surveillance camera that has machine learning going on in the background at the citizens of Portsmouth. and tell them that I feel comfortable with that, because I do not. And given that programs of this municipality, once adopted, have a tendency, or at least the capacity to grow, I don't generally like slippery slope arguments, but I think one camera is great, maybe two would be better. You know what, how about we put some over here, and before you know it, the town is maybe even not on our nickel, because we'll find some benefactor. I really was moved, Mr. Carcella, by your hearkening back to your coming from a dictatorship. And we live in this country with rights that are on a razor's edge, and it is not hard to envision any right we think is precious to us falling one way or another. And I just implore you to rescind our vote. And if you still believe in the project, let's take a much more careful and considered approach to it. Thank you. Mr.
Thank you, Mr.
President.
Casper. Ms. Jukusa?
Right. I just want to thank everybody from Portsmouth who's spoken tonight. It's so impressive. And I couldn't catch everyone's name, but Mr. McDade and Attorney Dion and Mr. Carcella, thank you for coming out. Thank you for the folks I haven't gotten your names. Just really, really great testimony. And I think frankly, the testimony on the other side was much, much less impressive, because it included the phrase, we must assume best intentions. And that's a problem, and very much outweighed by what the other side was saying. And I think we had a timing problem here, because I reached out to Steve Brown at ACLU June 22nd. We had the vote on June 27th, and people didn't realize that this was going on, and we literally had no negative testimony. And so, because we all are so supportive of our police, we voted. And now, though, the people know about this issue, you had a chance to speak. I think it's a different picture we have here, and I would support the motion to rescind.
Thank you, Mr. Jukusa. Is there any other council discussion?
Just one quick question for Chief Peters. I think it was mentioned at some point that Bristol hasn't adopted this program on the council level. Is that correct?
This is correct. It's my understanding that Bristol received and placed on file when Chief Lynch presented this to them in their May meeting. So they will be going forward with this.
Right. And part of our policy was, or part of our decision was based on the fact that Bristol was doing it in concert with us in the discussion back on the 27th. Okay, thank you. As I said back on the 27th, was I'm not comfortable with the personal implications and the tracking of it in terms of our personal rights. But since it was a temporary and a pilot program, I was more comfortable with it with the police and having it. Some of the changes that could be made if we dropped it from a 10-day, it should be a 30-day to a 10-day keeping, makes me feel more comfortable. But part of that discussion was that Bristol was going to do it as well. So at this point, if we can't get everything in line as was presented on the 27th, I would vote to rescind with the possibility of reconsidering in the future if we can tighten up some of the concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. I guess I was not here on the 27th, but I've been playing catch up, and I appreciate all the information that has been presented. I do support the use of technology. I think we've all heard that we are trending in that direction, and it's going on whether we realize it or not with our cell phones, Easy Pass, cameras. There are cameras everywhere for traffic and things. So I think we're, for one way or another, I think we're heading in that direction. But what struck me on this, and I've only been catching up on some of the things, is, and Mr. Fitzmaurice mentioned it tonight. I think Mr. McDade mentioned it as well. There's really not an ordinance that specifically would outline some of the criteria. There was references to, I think, House Bill 7507, Senate Bill 2650. Both of those, I think, were related to the automatic license plate readers. And they were looking at criteria and trying to provide some criteria for what would be allowable, what wouldn't be allowable. So I think we're heading in this direction, but we're not there yet. I think we need more time. I think we need more consensus with our legislators, and I'd like to see something done, you know, at a bigger scale, because it's not just the Mount Hope Bridge. There's other bridges. I think it's going to take more than just license plate readers. I think it's going to take combinations of suicide prevention barriers in addition, because that's a deterrent. That's a physical deterrent when you're on a bridge. The license plate readers could be a deterrent, but it's a timing thing. And I think unless there's a, you know, the dominoes are lined up, it's going to be really hard for someone to get there within a matter of seconds. Generally, when these things happen, it's a good Samaritan who's trying to save a life and delaying it until the police and additional resources can get there. So it is a problem, and I think it's going to take all of us working together to continue to try and prevent suicide. And, you know, at this point, I do not support the motion. I would vote to rescind. Sorry about that. But I think this is obviously it's a very serious issue, and it's one that I think will continue to move the needle forward as we try to address this problem. Any last, no? All right, so.
So as Chief Peters pointed out, the last time we discussed this, a lot of people who are contemplating jumping from a bridge don't just drive up to the bridge, run out and jump. They go over the bridge 2-3 times while they're sort of thinking it over. So this sort of system actually does have a potential for catching these people before they actually jump, which is why I think the idea is a good one. I'm very alarmed, though, by the fact that our potential contractor has to refer to lawyers in order to tell us that the data is going to be safe while in their custody, and that no other law enforcement agency, for any reason they deem appropriate, might have access to it. So I'd like to see some legal assurances that random photography of Portsmouth license plates isn't being used by people elsewhere for potentially legitimate purposes. I'd also like to see it codified so that we could, you know, have a system in cooperation with Bristol as to how this would work, and have it at the level of an ordinance so that it can't be altered without at least the public finding out about it. So I think as is, I'm not comfortable keeping the vote the way it is, and I'd vote to rescind, but I think this is a worthwhile idea that should be worked on more, because this is a huge problem in this country. And, you know, God knows when these nets are going to be put up. And if there's something that we could do faster to prevent people from doing, you know, committing this terrible deed, then we should definitely explore the possibility.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. I know Len had, do you want to defer?
Sorry. Point of information for accuracy, the vote that we took, people have referred to the 27th, was on the 13th. And the other item is we did get a revised letter from the ACLU today. So I know that that's not in our backup, which was posted last week. I just would like to make sure there's some follow-up to get that publicly posted. I don't know if it retroactively can be made part of this evening's agenda, because that's what people go to look for it, but.
We can put it on because it's the town's website for
Okay.
backup.
Thank you.
Ms. Abbott?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I voted against this last time, and so I'm grateful to my colleagues for reconsidering and having an open mind and listening to other people's opinions. I do believe that as a society and as a community, there's much more effective ways to prevent suicide, and so I hope we can redirect our efforts towards those other alternatives.
Thank you, Ms. Abbott. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Mr. Jukusa? Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0 to rescind. Okay. Thank you all. We are going to move on to new business. First item under new business is to request permission to temporarily install 6 by 2 foot banner and 435 4 by 5 inch purple flags for International Overdose Awareness Day, August 31st, to represent those Rhode Islanders who have lost their battle to this disease. It'll
Motion
be
to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we have a request approval to apply for a statewide body worn camera grant program. Chief Peters.
Mr. President, members of the council, unfortunately, this agenda item is probably ill-timed based on the cameras, but we had been notified mid-June that by July 15th, which 16th is Friday, we had to submit an application to the state if we want part of, I believe it's a $15 million funding for body worn cameras. So I'm here tonight to request body worn cameras. The funding is going to be made available to every police department in the state to outfit all officers. We would be looking to outfit all our officers up to and including the rank of captain, as well as our Prudence Island Public Safety Officer. So it should be 37 cameras. It is a 100% reimbursement program allocated for $17.50 per camera. That also includes the complete cost associated with the camera, the hardware, software, storage. So the price per camera itself is less than the $17.50, but the $17.50 makes up for the other costs associated with running this program. And the state would reimburse us $17.50 per officer over the course of a 5-year period. So I request your support for us to submit an application to the state for body worn cameras for our officers.
Move to approve.
Second.
Quick discussion. These cameras are a little bit different than what we were talking about previously.
Yeah,
These not
these
only
I actually
protect-
agree with.
These not only protect the citizens, but they also protect
They
your
do,
officers as well.
absolutely, absolutely.
Is it possible to ask for 40? Just
The-
because we know one's going to break.
I know, absolutely. What's probably going to happen, we may have to use some of our equipment line item to purchase a couple, but there's very strict regulations that we can't ask for spares. That's part of the grant, unfortunately. but
That's all. I'm
We're
asking.
gonna have to buy some.
Okay.
Is there any warranty on these cameras going along with that? Is there anything there?
We'd have to incorporate it. So that first year is that $17.50. It's recognized that in subsequent years, we wouldn't need that. So we can use $17.50 per officer per year for any of the expenses associated with it. So my understanding of it is if year 3, one breaks, that we'd be able, and that's my understanding of it, that we can use it because we won't need $17.50 per officer per year for 5 years for this. So unless something changes, I'll let you know, but that's our understanding of the grant.
Thank you. Quick question on, if the grant is awarded, does the town have, or are we preparing, or is there a statewide law governing use and policies and procedures?
Sure. So for us to actually receive the grant, we have to adopt the policy that's statewide that's been approved by the Attorney General. So the Attorney General in the previous months actually put this out for public comment. They've been working on this policy. So they do have a policy in place that we will have to adopt in order for us to get the grant funding.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay. New business number 3. This was a public notice that was submitted to the town from CRMC. And it's for Daniel Torre, 152 Winter Street, Wakefield, Rhode Island, for a state of Rhode Island ascent modification to utilize existing floating long lines for the use of low-profile floating baskets in place of existing higher-profile floating bags. This will result in no net increase in the square footage of the floating gear or in the number of vertical or horizontal lines used. This has to do with oyster farming and whatnot. The reason I had this put on the agenda is because the public comments are due by July 27th, and we do not meet. And we don't have a second meeting. So what I would like to do is, well, we can open for discussion tonight, but I'd like to, refer this to our town planner so that if there are any questions or comments that we need to address, we can get that in writing and get it submitted to CRMC on or before the 27th. So that was the intent of getting this on the agenda tonight. And I had to, I'll be honest, I did have to look this up to understand what exactly they were doing, but it looks like they're just trying to reuse the existing system. But I gotta believe Mr. Grebe is going to either correct me or confirm what I'm saying.
No, it's not that they're not reusing the existing system. They're reusing the current footprint.
Yeah, they're
with
the
newer
current
equipment.
footprint.
The only issue I have is they're talking about a lower profile buoy or bag, which might make it less easy to see as a boater. It might make them more dangerous. That would be my concern.
Okay, so perfect.
Mr. Hamilton.
So we have
stole-
comments.
Stole my thunder,
All right.
but they're going from a 4-inch black bag to a 2.5-inch black box. In night, fog, reduced visibility, it's very hard to see. This particular farm is 400 feet offshore, so small sailboats and so forth will be going in that, could be going in that area. While CRMC does require lights on the corners of these farms, they allow solar lights, which by the time the night's over, in many cases are dead. The farms themselves are not charted. The farms are not even noticed in the notice to mariners. So there's virtually no way for a boater to keep track of this. And I think CRMC needs to understand that they are truly creating a hazard to navigation on our harbor areas. And this is within the harbor management plan. It's less than 500 feet offshore. And I think the town should think about saying, we don't support above water oyster farms. Below the water oyster farms are fine, but these are truly a hazard to navigation. And I'm not sure why CRMC is allowing them, but they are. And I just wanted to let you know
I appreciate
the other side of it.
No, I appreciate the comments, and I think what I'm hearing is that maybe with some information from the Harbor Commission as well, we could formulate some comments and get them off to CRMC expressing our concerns. And that's,
Unfortunately, we already missed the Harbor Commission meeting, but I think our biggest
Special
concern-
meeting.
The Harbor Commission did discuss this during their meeting, and individually, because we didn't think we could get on the agenda to get your permission to talk for the town, but individually, 3 members of the aquaculture subcommittee are going to the 27th meeting to talk. And with your permission, I guess, we'd certainly be able to say that the town of Portsmouth supports not having these above water oyster farms. Maybe that's too far to go tonight, but
it's technically not on the agenda, but I think my concern specifically for this item is the safety of this particular That would be another.
Yeah,
agenda
all
if
right,
you
yeah, all
wanted
right,
that.
yes.
But for
This particular
thing,
one,
we need to have it because it is an area where it's active water skiing, swimming, paddleboarding,
all of that.
everything, kayaking, that it needs to be properly marked so people know it's there.
Yes.
That's my concern.
It's, I
Oh,
think it's elite. I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Abbott, no, Ms. Abbott has-
No, I would agree. I think I'm completely in favor of the oyster farm in and of itself, but I'm not sure it even has lights. I've been there at dusk on boat many times and I've never
You
noticed
can't see
lights.
them.
You can't see it at all until you're right on top of it. I think proper markings like a low wake zone, white cone or whatever would be much more suitable. There's other ones that I've seen in the Secana that have at least white buoys marking the perimeter of it. Anything to make it a little bit more, a little bit easier to spot would be helpful. Otherwise, I guess it doesn't really matter what kind of tackle they use.
So these traps are at the surface or just below, so they could potentially entangle propellers.
They essentially,
rudders
yeah, you
and-
definitely can't
You
boat
can't drive
over
through
them.
They're not traps.
They float and there's that much above the water.
So they're right
They're
at the surface.
Right on the
plastic
surface.
mesh bags that float right
Okay.
below the surface of the water with lines holding them in place.
Right.
But there's nothing really marking the perimeter. So from far away, it just, you can't really tell where it is.
So, I mean, the big problem is if you don't see them, you could easily snare them.
Yeah, and
destroy
at
the
sunset
boat.
or at dusk, it's almost impossible to see.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a big problem.
So I think the important thing here is that we have the ability to express some comments, safety related. We have time, or our town planner has time in order to get those comments. And there's nothing stopping the public from commenting. But when the letter came in, I realized that we would not have another meeting. So I wanted to make sure that we at least had this discussion to refer it and at least take some action.
Thank
But
you. Your instincts were absolutely right on.
every now and then. Okay, do we need a motion or?
I would think we need a motion to at least direct
Yeah.
the town planner to please adopt a letter stating the safety concerns that the council has considering this specific installation, and that it should be properly marked so that our citizens aren't getting hurt.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 7-0. And the next one is very similar. This one came in from DEM. It was an application for the Common Fence Point Improvement Association for the state of Rhode Island dredge permit and water quality certification to perform maintenance dredging of the creek outlet to restore tidal connectivity between Mount Hope Bay and the marsh and Salt Pond. Again, this public comments are due by July 30th. So if the town were to have any comments or concerns, we could get those sent in through the town planner.
My only main concern for me is that this was done 25 years ago, give or take, and it silted back in. So I think it needs to be done. To keep the tidal flow, it helps keep down mosquitoes and all the other fun stuff that happens with stagnant water. But I would like to see if they can get it done in a way that is more permanent. Similar to, Founder's Brook was done roughly around the same time, and that has stayed open, where this one closed itself back in.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do just possibly with the storms and the frequency of storms and how much stuff gets, you get a nor'easter, it gets jammed up there. Yeah, so, but I think if we have any coordinated DPW activities or if there's anything down there, this is our opportunity to get comments in. Mr. Whitaker?
Council President, members of the council. Last year, we did meet Pam Rubinoff down there from DEM, and we met a whole bunch of people. We did a tour of that. And like you said, it is getting silted in that throat because all the seashells keep coming up there. And they were trying to get a grant together, and they were going to rent, I don't know if you remember Al Gatman from DEM. He has an excavator. They wanted to see if Public Works could supply an operator to operate the excavator while they drenched it all on it. We had no problems with that, and I thought it was a good idea just with the tidal flow down there too. But we haven't heard anything about the grant yet. But I support that. Like Mr. Hamilton said, it's great to just get the tidal flow back working in that area.
So again, Any public comments due by July 30th? And even if we support it, we can send that in as well saying, hey, we support the project, so please approve it.
Yep, no problem.
Would you like me to make a motion to say that we support the project?
I would absolutely love that.
We'd like to see it move forward.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 7-0. Okay, on to number 5. It's a request to award the replacement of the Glen Manor pedestrian bridge to Regan Marine Construction LLC. Mr. Woodhead?
Council President, members of the council, we budgeted $35,000 in last year's capital improvement for the repair of the steel pedestrian bridge at Glen Manor House. After we went down there and took another look at it, it's in a little worse shape than a repair. So I think it was more cost effective. So for us to replace the bridge with an aluminum bridge with a aluminum walkway, right now it's a steel bridge and it needs a lot of maintenance and it's got a pressure treated walkway over the top of it. I did talk to Don and Kate from the Glen Manor House about this. And I explained to them that we didn't have enough funding for the replacement of a full bridge. And they said that they were on board with the replacement of the bridge and they would bring it to the committee members to see if they could use their CIP. They have money left over in their CIP funds for the project. And they did bring it in front of their committee in May, and then they did approve it. So we went out to bid and we only got 2 proposals for the bids. So I would just request that the council approve the bid to Glen Manor pedestrian bridge replacement to Regan Marine Construction for $74,950.
So moved with a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Seconded.
Thank you. Pretty wide disparity range here.
Yes,
Are we getting, removal is one thing, that's no big deal.
right.
But the gauge of the aluminum, the strength of the aluminum and the life expectancy of the aluminum bridge, do you see that they're the same on both proposals?
Regan Marine Construction, they have their own fabrication and they build their own bridges. And no matter what bridge we have to put on there, it has to be stamped by a structural PE, Rhode Island PE stamp. So we are going to get all the loads and all like that on the aluminum bridge, so it should last. So I think the problem with East Coast Construction, they're not a bridge manufacturer or they're not in the marine business. So I think they had a subcontract out with another company. So I think that's what the disparity.
They were probably going to buy it from Regan.
They could have
Right,
been.
But I just want to make sure that
I think talking with East Coast, I think they were going to do it by land. They would have to set up a crane on land and Regan's just going to bring up their barge and pop it off and put another one.
Regan will do it much quicker.
that's fine. I just want, I don't want to see us replacing it in 10 years.
No, I agree with you 100%.
That's all.
I thought the same thing when I saw the prices.
Okay.
I'm just gonna say that I'm bummed to see the bridge replaced with an aluminum bridge, but
The steel just not-
the steel of the wood is much more charming, especially for wedding photos, but oh well.
It's not charming if the bride falls through.
That is
said
true.
bridge.
That is true. That is true.
You can Photoshop that.
Very memorable.
Mm.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Woodhead. And finally, number 6, the Rhode Island Department of Transportation request for the town to take ownership of Teddy's Beach. Mr. Rayner.
Yeah, Mr. President, it was discussed with the council a while ago. There was a discussion with the council a while ago in regard to Teddy's Beach and the Old Stone Bridge. So I've been working with DOT for the last couple of months to determine what is the possibility of the town taking ownership of this property so that we could, at least in theory, pursue renovations that would be much in line with what was done on the Tiverton side. I've been approached by DOT. I'll just read the question as stated. Is the town in a position to pay $300,000 for the property? They valued Teddy's Beach at $300,000. So here are in further discussions, here are the 3 options. We could pay $300,000 We would get Teddy's Beach, we would get the Stone Bridge, we wouldn't get the road leading up to it. The state want to maintain ownership of that. And then it's ours outright. We can do anything we want with it. There is an option to get it gratis. We would pay no money for it. If we pursue that option, the timeline is a little longer. No definitive date when it would get turned over, but that would start the process moving. But we would not be allowed to put any structures or facilities on the property. So it would have to stay essentially the same as it is. We could do a renovation to the Old Stone Bridge, but it would essentially have to be, no facility. So you could still use it for fishing or whatever, which you're technically not supposed to right now because there's a fence crossing. People do it anyways. Or your third option is if we make no decision tonight, and the whole reason, what's driving this is they need a decision this month. If we don't make a decision tonight, that's perfectly fine. It's not going to go anywhere, but they won't readdress this again until next spring.
Yeah, no, that's not.
So
Can we afford $300,000?
I anticipated that question. So if we were to pay the 300,000, we could do it. I mean, there's obviously no money in the budget to do that. However, we do have ARPA funds. Right now, there's about $126,000 that is not earmarked out of ARPA funds. We have also placed into that the recommended priorities list. We put in placeholders for Island Park storm drain repair and Portsmouth Park storm drain and catch basin replacement. Those two items are $820,000. That was a swag. That was our best guess. So we could use 126,000 that's remaining, and then take the remainder out of those two funds, keep them as, keep the degradation as equitable as possible between those two funds, and then we would have the 300,000 that we could use for that property. So you in that short answer to your question, yes, we do have the money. You could do that. Yes, we could go gratis, just wait a little longer. But we wouldn't have the option of putting any facilities on, or we could just say we want to punt and we'll readdress it again next spring.
Would encasing the whole stone bridge with a new bulkhead and increasing the elevation and doing everything that Tiverton did be considered a new structure or a facility, or would that be? It's a little bit more than a reconstruction.
Yeah, and that question hasn't been answered yet. I have asked the question. DOT's response, without directly answering that question, is they put over $850,000 of repairs into it in the storm, and they feel that that's good enough.
Wait, our current one?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Where?
just
The riprap.
Oh, yes.
The riprap.
The riprap, yeah,
When they
the
took out the
underneath.
riprap, they put back in.
It's just to keep it from.
It was emergency
Right.
repair.
Yeah. that's right.
So my instinct is they would think that that's good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we would probably have to go to them to get permission to do what they did on.
And then do
Tiverton.
it over again in 10
Yeah.
years.
Mr. President, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Well.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I would just add that this is, my speculation, but I think us investing $300,000 to obtain full unhindered rights to this property would probably look better when requesting grant funds to then turn around and replace
Yeah.
it.
That's a really good point. And Portsmouth has rarely, if ever, regretted acquiring property. This is a piece of coastal access property that people use. I think it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, because next spring, we're going to have a new governor, we're going to have a new administration, we're going to have who knows what. I don't believe that revisiting it next spring is wise. I think that it's rolling the dice that anybody would be open to the idea beyond the people who we have at the table right now. I'd rather not spend any money, but for this generation and the next generation and the next generation. We want to be able to do with that property what the people of Portsmouth want to be able to do with that property without having to go to DOT and say, can we put a park bench on it? I would support acquiring the property outright.
Mr. Rayner, I have a question. I mean, it's not in good shape. What will sea level rise and climate change and major storms do to this place?
We have to do to our side what Tiverton did to their side, and then it would be fine.
Or something lesser. We don't have to go quite all that way, but we do have to do something to it to make it usable.
The problem is that you're looking at roughly $4 million to do it to their side. I
Nowadays,
could,
probably more.
but I could make the argument that our side on the northern part, or northern western part, the part that they repaired is probably stronger than what they did on Tiverton, because that's a riprap, which washes away the waves, so wave action more than just a straight wall slamming into it. But we, as a council, have to understand that this isn't a $300,000 purchase and, you know, we're all set.
No.
It brings in a lot of other headaches, such as policing the area, which chief is going to have to deal with, which Mr. Woodhead's going to have to deal with.
Well, DOT doesn't police it now.
DOT shouldn't police it. DEM should police it. DEM should be out there finding the fishermen for littering and making sure that they have their licenses and doing all that. Unfortunately, DEM has one guy for Newport County.
So that the frustration with that property I've been here 7 years and I'm sure well predates me. It was just 3 years ago when we can finally figure out who between DEM and DOT would admit ownership of the property. As rightfully highlighted, there is no policing of the property other than the dilapidated fence. DOT did repair the north section of the bridge. So if we go in eyes wide open. If we're going to take this, we have to understand that there are going to be maintenance costs, there are going to be policing costs, garbage costs. All the complaints are now going to come to town hall and not to DOT. And believe me, there's many. And we'll do our best. The other thing is we'll have to do an engineering. This is the whole reason why we're going to an on-call engineer. We're going to have an engineering study done to tell us exactly what needs to be done to that structure to solidify it. Maybe DOT is right, maybe it's fine. But what steps need to be taken to make this pedestrian friendly and make it less of an eyesore than it is now so that people can use that piece of property. That's not going to happen overnight. This is going to be a long-term project. And obviously there are concerned citizens out there that have stepped up to the podium and said, don't worry, we're going to pay for it all. But it's really awkward for them to do anything moving forward when we don't own the property. So it's, we go in eyes wide open, understanding that it's not going to be turned into a Tiverton piece of property overnight. It's going to take a while. And in the meantime, we're going to have to figure out how we maintain it and police it.
It'll take as long as it needs to take to be done right. But at the end of the day, it's in our town. It's our coastline. It's a beach that our residents use. Like, what kind of message do we want to send to our, our kids that we're only the free approach never works out well in our favor. There's always strings attached. I think $300,000 for a beach and a waterfront property like that in Portsmouth is unheard of.
I'm not arguing.
Yeah, so I think it would be crazy to turn it down.
Well,
As long as we can afford it. So I don't have $300,000 to pay for it. But if you think we can do it, I think there's no reason to not.
What do you think, Mr. Rayner, it's going to cost? Because I just heard the number $5 million thrown out to make it look like Tiverton.
Early in going all the way back to early last year, I mean, we've had multiple meetings with engineers and interested parties, ranging anywhere from $3 to $5 million. It cost all in, it was about $5 million, as I understand it, on the Tiverton side. So we're using that as a baseline. We don't think it's going to be as extensive as what they did on the Tiverton side. We don't have a gas station to get rid of. We don't have to truck in sand, anything like that. The biggest concern, quite frankly, I think is going to be in the near term to get an engineering analysis structural analysis done of the structure so that we don't put ourselves in a position where we were a couple years ago when the north side collapsed and and the marinas were in danger. So that'll be the first priority.
Does it make sense to buy it and then do the study? I mean, because even though
Well, I
it's
would go
not,
to Ms. Abbott's argument. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to have this opportunity again.
oh, okay,
Nothing's been done to it. Again, I was stationed here years and years ago. I've been coming to Portsmouth for many, many years. Nothing has changed down there and it's always been an eyesore. And I think it's time, if we have the will and part of the resources here to make it better, then we ought to make it better. Because it doesn't appear that anybody else is going to do it.
No, it's in our town. It's up to us.
But it's, like, the argument has always been, it's not ours. It belongs to DOT. And then DOT said it's not ours, it's DEM's. That took decades to figure out that, well, no, actually it is DOT's. And that took almost, hurricane force winds to get DOT to stand up and say, yeah, okay, we got to fix it.
Mr. Kelly, you had a comment, question?
I have a couple comments, but is it just Teddy's Beach and the Stone Bridge? Because I haven't heard anybody talk about the boat launch yet.
The boat launch is DEM, CRMC.
And not including.
No, the boat launch
Okay.
is not included.
I just wanted to confirm that because I hadn't heard anybody just address that yet, because that apparently needs some significant work as well.
Eventually it will, absolutely. We're focused on Weaver Cove right now, so.
So I totally agree we should buy it. I've lived down there most of my entire life and I've gone to Teddy's Beach and it is an eyesore, the Stone Bridge. The fence used to be worse, believe it or not. And, right next to our marinas, right next to a very nice restaurant. It's in our town. It's what our citizens use, our children use, and we should do what we can to make it nice.
Yeah, the boat launch, just want to say, that is owned and serviced by Rhode Island DEM.
Thank you.
So.
I support it.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. So this is a unique opportunity. I would hope that they would give us a little bit more time in order to assess some things and get some numbers. I know they're saying no. I do support the opportunity to acquire, the beach and the bridge. What I'd like to maybe get a little bit more information on is Park Ave. So that piece of Park Ave that goes that way.
They want to maintain.
They want to maintain it. So we'd still have some limitations with, we wouldn't have control over certain features down there along the roadway. We'd own the beach and we own the bridge. The boat ramp is still DEM, so there's still got to be some type of agreements worked out. Years ago, we acquired the Mount Hope, marina, the Mount Hope parcel. And we know that that's taken some time. So, to Mr. Hamilton's point, this could take a while. But I think if we have this opportunity, we should, take advantage of it. Maybe we got to look a little bit harder at the dollars and what we can do there. But, I do support the intent here. What is their cutoff, Mr. Rayner? They need an answer by the end of July.
They said mid-July. so
Mid-July.
we're essentially there.
Yeah.
So tomorrow.
Is there any opportunity to haggle with them?
Can I-
How about 250?
Can I just chime in one more time on I think both you and Linda were hinting at this, but whether we pay the 300,000 and have full unrestricted ownership of, the bridge, which is the most expensive piece of this puzzle, or whether we say we want it free, but we don't know how long it's going to take or what strings are going to be attached. That doesn't change the structural condition of the thing. It's
Oh, no.
still going to need the same amount of work and it's still going to cost a lot of money to fix. So one way or the other, we're going to have to figure out how to find the money to get it done properly. And without the strings attached, we're gonna have a lot more flexibility to be creative in how we do that.
Yeah.
And I think it will really serve us better in the long run.
It sounds like we don't buy it. We are not sure what we'll be able to do as far as rehabbing the property.
Yeah, then we have to go get permission and
Yeah,
whatnot.
not to put my too
Well,
fine a point on it, but if we don't buy it out right now, I'm not convinced we will ever get a chance to get it. Because somebody somewhere will change their mind. And that's, we happen to be in alignment on some people at DOT right now who say, number one, they own it. And number two, they're willing to sell it. And
Mr. Rayner, next
Quick
time you
before
talk
they
to
figure out they
DOT,
shouldn't be
maybe you
doing
could
it.
be wearing one of Chief Peter's body cameras. I think that might be it.
So, Mr. Rayner, when you and I walked down there, John Vitt, we talked about tiers of costs of things we might look at doing, going the full Tiverton, if you will, was millions of dollars.
Right.
I know. But something along the lines of simply making it pedestrian safe with a surface that could be walked on with railings would be much cheaper, depending on the type of surface we choose to use.
Yeah,
And so
there's a lot of
there
questions
might be
here. Do we want to go
approaches-
pressure treated wood? Do we want to go? It depends
Right.
on the materials, which is, we were marching down this road. We had some engineers submit some bids to do a study. We rejected them. We're going to go a different route. We'll get an on-call engineer who will do this, perform the study. We're fully aware that we need to do this study and we need to look at options.
Okay.
We're not going to look at just, okay,
It's gotta be
go
like Tiverton.
drive over to Tiverton,
Yeah.
take a look at that. That's exactly what we want. We don't know if that's appropriate for us. We want to look at some options, and there'll be obviously much more discussion on this in the future. And then there's the Portsmouth, or the, what do they call themselves? The Park Avenue.
Island Park Preservation
Yeah,
Society.
Preservation Society that wants to get involved and has committed to raising money for this. So we'll be in partnership with some folks that are interested in moving this forward.
So here are my concerns, thoughts. If I go buy a house, I get an inspection before I take ownership of the house.
Not nowadays, you don't.
If I'm buying a house, I'm getting an inspection before I buy the house. I grant you that there's people out there that just buy it sight unseen, but that's their own fault.
Yeah.
Part of our, for lack of a better term, purchase and sales agreement with the state of Rhode Island should be, we should be afforded A, the right to inspect it before we take ownership. And B, we want to make sure that we're not shut out from the ability to work with DOT in the future to get state and federal grants to fix up the said property. So that,
Right.
those two things should be in that agreement.
We can certainly discuss that. The thrust of this is Teddy's Beach. That's what they're making the value on. You know, the bridge is being thrown in.
Yeah.
So. Understood. And some, as Mr. Casper mentioned, they could come along to sell it to any Joe Blow.
Yeah.
They could.
So, but we can certainly do that. Their attitude is, they did $850,000 of work reinforcing and repairing this, and they believe it is safe, and that the wall is in good shape. This is where we're
Can we
at
do
right
a
now.
structural inspection before
We
like
sure can.
closing?
Yeah, we sure can, and we'll ask for this in the contracts. But I just need to know if you want to move forward.
I don't suppose they'll take a low ball of like 150.
Well, see.
Well,
so-
they think that they think that the 300,000 is a low ball.
I understand.
Did they present any particular valuation to back that up? I mean, when you're buying a house, to go back to that analogy, there's always.
They did an appraisal, so I don't know who did their appraisal. I don't, I
Do we have a copy of
I
it?
just got this last week, so
Okay.
it's like,
Yeah.
all right, and we didn't answer now, so, these are our three options.
I think if we have the money, which we do, if we juggle a few things around, this is a nice opportunity. Mr. Aguirre brought up a piece of property that we own, but there are strings attached with the DEM and other groups. This would be a Portsmouth-owned property where there are no strings attached, that we have a little bit more flexibility of what we can do and can't do with the property.
I defer to the engineers, but on the other hand, we have staff sitting here and it looks like you want to say something. I'd like to hear, I'd like to hear what our DPW and our police chief, if they have comments.
I think it's a great opportunity to buy a piece of property for $300,000. Don't get me wrong. I'm just concerned, like Mr. Reyna said, you know, we've had issues down there before, and Public Works' manpower is very limited. And we're gonna take on more property, and we'll have to put more, you know, more pressure on Public Works to maintain this piece of property. I think that's gonna be reflected in another budget for manpower increase. I'm sure Mr. Reyna is gonna agree with that, but we're gonna have to be doing that. I just want to make sure, like Mr. Reyna said, we're gonna go in eyes wide open. It's gonna have to get mowed, it's gonna have to, the litter's gonna be picked up. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different issues that are out there that we have to look at. I mean, the insurance, we have to make sure insurance is gonna be covered on it. So we just want to
100% agreed, and I think residents of Portsmouth deserve it.
And are willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
And have put it at the top of the priority of our spending.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to go immediately to the top, but we need to, it's
Well,
like
it-
budgeting every year.
No, I think there's
We
a capital
figure out-
improve, there's a 5-year rolling capital improvement plan.
Yeah, but
And
we
is
don't,
that-
well, I think
and
we're
gonna-
all agreeing is that we don't necessarily need to foot the bill to do all the improvements. We need to come up with a plan for how we're gonna pay
Right,
for
but
the
if-
improvements. I think as far as DPW goes, the fence is up there now. Nobody can walk on it. Okay, I take that back. Nobody should be walking on it. But we need to come up with a plan for how we're gonna take care of it. It's in our town. Like, no matter what we do, it's in our town. Our residents use it. It should be our responsibility, and we should take care of it properly.
We should. I mean, but there are a lot of properties that, if you look at our capital improvement plan, have been underfunded and deferred maintenance to death practically. And people were handing out tax breaks and keeping our taxes artificially low to have this, situation where we can defer maintenance all
And
over the
we've been
place.
slowly
And
trying to reverse that.
We
So-
absolutely, I feel like we have been slowly reversing it because we finally have these rolling 5-year capital improvement plans. I'm just saying that it feels a little odd to be rushed into this. And yes, of course, $300,000 for a piece of property, what the heck? And I agree with your sentiments, but I'm just saying, I want some assurance that this thing is going to fit, will be rolled into our current tax structure and what our plans are in a reasonable way, that we're not buying a money pit that suddenly will have a problem, and that we have to, because right now, if there's a problem, they paid $825,000 to fix it, right? That wasn't us. But now it's going to be. So that's okay? I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
All right, so what we do know is, going to interject here. We do know we're going to approach them with our intent to purchase, but we would like to get the structural evaluation done so that if we are going in with our eyes open, we have something to help support our decision process. And I think they would be open to that. They're looking for an indication from us. Our indication is that we would like to pursue it, and we just want to make sure that it's feasible, that there's no major flaws, and that
That's fixable, yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to take time. Even if we said, yes, we will buy it without question today, it still take time to draft up a deed and transfer, and those will all be detailed things that would be, there'll be opportunity to do what we need to do.
They do not move at lightning speed, so I think time could be on our side.
I think in order for DOT to sell it to us, it might have to go back to might go to the General Assembly for their approval to sell a piece of property. So
There's definitely a process, but I
it
think.
might not happen until January.
That's right.
Right. But I think what they're asking for is, do we want to consider it?
Yeah.
I'm reading the room here. I think the answer is yes, with some conditions that we are at least allowed to do an independent evaluation of it.
I will make a motion that we approach the DOT to purchase Teddy Beach and Stone Bridge for $300,000 with the request of a full inspection and the ability to apply for grants through the DOT for repairs in the future.
Second.
I'll second that, but do we need to have as part of this motion, the quote, ability to apply to DOT for grants in the future?
My concern is that they don't put that in there and they say the
The thought
infrastructure
is, yes.
funds and resiliency funds that we have, okay, that's forced this problem now. We don't have to give them that money. We can stick it over here.
That's a good point.
I want to make sure that that's in there so they don't say, hey, you guys bought it as is.
Yeah.
you're on your own.
Yeah.
To
Thank you.
Ms. Abbott's point
No,
of people
thank you.
buying houses now.
Right.
It probably doesn't hurt to throw it in there and see what they say. It's
That's right.
really more about, I think they're just looking for a thumbs up from us or a thumbs down, or are we willing to go down this road with them? I think we're willing to go down the road, no pun intended, with DOT.
more of a
Provided,
bridge,
provided we can do our inspection and have some assurances.
And I think I have to add to the motion to utilize ARPA funds to purchase the property.
Second, if not.
So we know where the money's
Mr.
coming from.
Rayner, and we've already taken votes previously to encumber those funds and directions.
Okay.
And we draw down from the 820,000 that's going to be, was.
Well, so
towards-
126, there's,
It's, right. And those projects can stand a hit of having those amount, those are.
potentially, maybe we can get some infrastructure money out of the new infrastructure bill to help with those funds too.
Okay, because storm drains sound important. Right.
I don't think there's been a council meeting lately where I haven't announced some kind of grant opportunity. For whatever periods.
We can have fun right now because we have our new town planner here and do what we do, with Mr. Rayner, and just keep throwing stuff in her lap.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Okay. So next we have correspondence.
I would like to make a motion to place items 1 and 2 on file and bring item 3 forward at our next council meeting and invite Mayflower Energy's representatives here to make a presentation to exactly what they want to do or plan to ask for to go down. At this point, it's Boyd's Lane and out Founder's Brook or down Anthony and out the golf course, who knows what it is. But I would like them to come in and present it to the council and the community in general.
Second.
Yeah, the maps were a little unclear.
Well, it was also upside down.
Okay, so all those in favor, items 1 and 2 will go to receive and place on file, and number 3, we'll have Mayflower Energy come in at our August 9th, which is the Tuesday meeting, and give us a presentation on their project. All those in favor?
Wait, just a, is Mr. Rayner, will you be back by August 9th?
Yes.
That's okay. All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Future meetings, again, just a reminder, our July 25th meeting has been canceled. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, August 9th, and then followed by August 22nd.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you all.